taking another look at a general election contest heading in towards November, of course. We're looking at the Clark County District Attorney race, and Tim Treffinger is here running for District Attorney as a Republican. Tim, it is good to see you, sir.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Let's just get into why you're running in the first place against Steve Wolfson, who's been an incumbent for a long time, as you know. Why jump into the race?
Well, part of it's I believe in balance and I believe in equality on both sides. And the DA's race, historically, at least for the past couple of cycles, have just been a Democratic primary. And when I saw that no one was going to jump in on the conservative side, I felt it was important to have those voices recognized, and that's why I'm in this race.
What is it about Mr. Wolfson's performance as prosecutor in Clark County that concerns you, that you think you would do differently if you were elected into office?
Sure, I think that mainly it comes down to a matter of leadership. I mean, he is not going into court and prosecuting cases. He has taken a very administrative role. And I think because of that disconnect between him and his deputies, not all of his policies are being enforced. They're not being done consistently. There's a lot of great attorneys in that office. There's just a lack of leadership and involvement in day-to-day running in the court system.
You have said that you will, if you're elected, pick up a case from time to time to prosecute if you're elected as district attorney. What cases would you prosecute?
Whatever cases the office needed help with. I don't plan on just taking the high-end cases. I think you need to pick up and support your deputies, even if you're second chairing some cases. Anything to do to support the office. That way you're plugged in with your deputies and you know what's going on day to day coming out of your office.
Maybe just a little more specifically, just to backtrack a little bit of you talk about the lack of leadership at the district attorney's office. How has that manifested itself in your point of view in prosecutions, in criminal justice, in just how the wheels of the prosecutor's office are moving?
Sure, it's a matter of consistency, I think, more than anything else. You should be able to walk into a courtroom, similar people facing similar charges, and kind of know what to expect. But especially recently, and there's been many stories about people who they believe should have been charged, maybe weren't because they were financially involved or friends of Steve's or whoever. It needs to be consistent, no matter who you are, whether you're a citizen, a judge, a cop. All the laws need to be enforced efficiently and equally, and that's just not happening.
Now you're addressing something that Ozzie Fumo, who ran against Steve in the Democratic primary, mentioned as well, sort of an allegation of favoritism, something that Steve himself has adamantly denied. Do you believe that the prosecutor's office plays favorites?
I believe they shouldn't. I haven't seen enough evidence to firmly point a finger and say he's playing favorites. What I can say is it's not happening consistently, and whatever the reason for that is, I think it's inappropriate.
Another issue you've brought up is family court and corruption in family court. What are some examples that you think are happening here in Clark County?
Well, we have a lot of issues in family court. There's a lot of inconsistency there, too. Depending on what department you're walking into, it's unclear how the law is going to be applied. We have contempt charges coming up where people are not afforded the right to counsel and are thrown in jail for a period of time. There's a lot of different things there that I think can either be handled better, and if there are people playing favorites or doing corrupt things in family court, that should be investigated and that should be prosecuted.
Perhaps one thing maybe viewers at home should know is, they may not know who you are. Tell me about your background in law and your experience in prosecution.
Sure. I came out of law school from University of New Hampshire, graduated with a JD and LLM in international criminal law and social justice. Came out to Nevada, out to Virginia City of all places, Story County, where I spent about a year finishing my externship. From there, I went into the Nevada Attorney General's office, where I prosecuted sex crimes, domestic violence, crimes against women for 3 counties, and then went into private practice, and I've been there ever since. Right now, I focus mainly on criminal defense and family law.
Part of your past is your own experience with criminal prosecution. You entered a plea deal on heroin charges back in 2015. Maybe explain to the viewers what happened back then,
Sure.
And maybe how that experience has changed you and maybe changed your practice and how you perceive the justice system.
Sure. When I came out of law school, I expected to be a prosecutor my entire career, so being on the other side of that table was certainly a surreal experience. I went through the diversion program. An ex of mine developed a drug issue. I was trying to get her clean. Unfortunately, in the midst of trying to get her clean, she was selling drugs out of the house while I wasn't home. Police come and raid the house. I end up in the system myself. I did do a plea agreement for a possession charge. I went through the diversion program, which I am a huge proponent of, that gives people second chances who have never been in trouble before or first-time offenders. Had my case dismissed, but I think it gives me an appreciation of both sides of the table. Not only have I been a prosecutor and a criminal defense attorney, I've been a defendant. I understand what that process is like. I understand the benefits of those programs and giving certain people chances, because probation, in my opinion, isn't hard if you follow the rules, and I think everybody deserves a second chance. But if you can't work within that system, that prison is always there for you. So I am hard on crime. I just believe in diversion programs.
So you mentioned how your experience with these charges, you learned that side of the diversion program and probation and so forth. Were there other things that you learned about the prosecution standpoint that you think maybe could be brought to Clark County? Absolutely.
I think my case in particular, I was made an example of because I was a prosecutor in that county. I think that most other people in my situation would have been offered a lighter deal than what I had to go through, and I think that just shows favoritism isn't appropriate at any level. Everybody should be treated the same. A police officer who's prosecuted for domestic violence, for example, shouldn't face harsher penalties than the person on the street. Everybody should be treated equally.
You talked about the diversion programs and so forth. There's some specialty courts in Clark County. We've got the drug courts, veterans courts, for example. Should those continue? Do you think those are successes?
Yes. Veterans court in particular I think is incredibly important. Those people go through things and experience trauma that most of us everyday people who have never been in the military would never understand. And I think that court in particular is very important. Drug court is incredibly important. Drugs are wreaking havoc on this county. It's part of the reason that our crime rate is so high. And trying to get people clean so that they don't keep going back through the system over and over again is an incredibly important thing. I think those programs could be expanded without going too much into taxpayer pockets, and I believe that everybody should have access to those programs. Right now the DA's office is kind of gatekeeping. Everyone should be able to apply. It shouldn't be which prosecutor you get decides what program you can go into.
Another issue in Nevada for years has been the issue of the death penalty. The incumbent, Mr. Wolfson, says he kind of likes to have it out there just in case, essentially, that's kind of why it's there. What's your stance on the death penalty?
I am pro-death penalty, but I believe it's a specific tool for a specific purpose. It's for the worst of the worst cases. I don't think anyone here, or at least most people, wouldn't argue that the October Festival shooter was not had he survived, that would have been an appropriate death penalty case. I don't believe it's for every case. I do believe it needs to be, instituted in an even and equal manner, and only for the worst of the worst cases. But I am pro-death penalty.
On that issue, the issue of the specialty courts, the issue of other aspects, family courts, and so forth. A lot of the things you're describing don't sound too dissimilar from the way things are now. Just help me understand the difference between you and your opponent when people go into the ballot box. How are you different? How would your running the DA's office be different than Mr. Wolfson?
I'm going to bring equality and consistency. If you're able to apply for a specialty court program, it shouldn't matter what prosecutor you're in front of. Like I said, that should be available to everybody. Let the judges decide who they allow into those programs. Consistency of charging. I'm going to make sure that charges are brought where it's appropriate, whether it's favoritism or just a negligence, whatever you want to call it, because of these charging decisions. That type of stuff is going to stop. I'm also not for decriminalizing shoplifting and things that are causing damage to our small businesses. I believe I have a much tougher stance on crime than Steve does, and while we do agree on certain things like the death penalty, I still don't agree with how consistently he applies the death penalty. He does use it in limited cases, but I don't always agree that they're the correct cases or that it's applied evenly.
Okay. It's a very interesting race, and Tim, it's good of you to come around and talk with us about your entrance in as a Republican for the Clark County District Attorney's Office. Appreciate the time.
Thank you for having me.
Tim Treffinger, running for Clark County District Attorney.